We are live on YouTube. Vice Chair Cervantes, if you want to get started.
Thank you. Renata, do we have a quorum? Can we tell here?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So good evening, everyone. I am pinch hitting for our chair, Chris Lee, who may join us. She is driving through Montana looking for opportunity sites to add to our plan. I wish her well. I hear there's some land there, so we'll see how it turns out. So I'd like to welcome you all to the May 18th meeting of the General Plan Advisory Committee. As you all know, this is being streamed live, accessible by Zoom. And I think we should start with a roll call. So Renata or Sarah, if you want to do the honors.
Absolutely. Carol Singer.
Here.
Namrata Kaslanati.
Here.
Don Jenkins. I see Don. I don't hear Don though.
Maybe he's on mute.
Yeah.
Present.
Thank you. Stella Witherspoon.
Present.
Matt Pease.
Here.
Beth Needle.
Here.
Jim Cervantes.
Here.
Mike Kim.
Here.
Thank you. Susie Kelly.
Here.
Christine Rasmussen.
I'm present. I'm having trouble with my video though. Is that can be a
No problem. And Chris Lee is absent. Commissioner Anna Radonich.
Present.
And Mayor Susan Kendall.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. Next agenda item is adoption of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
second.
Moved by Matt Pease, second by Carol Singer. Thank you. I think the protocol is to do a roll call here, which is probably overkill, but Renata, if you could call the roll, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Carol Singer.
Aye.
Namrata Kaslanati.
Aye.
Don Jenkins.
Aye.
Stella Witherspoon.
Aye.
Matt Pease.
Aye.
Beth Needle.
Aye.
Jim Cervantes.
Aye.
Mike Kim.
Aye.
Susie Kelly.
Aye.
Christine Rasmussen. Gone. Okay. Chair Lee is absent. And that is everybody. Oh, Christine's back.
So we're all good?
Christine, do you have a vote to adopt the agenda?
Yes, I do. I'm voting yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about
We're
that,
all-
guys.
No problem. We're all set. Thank you.
So with the agenda adopted, we have two main items tonight. The first of which is a presentation and discussion regarding the housing element workshops and sort of a discussion of next steps.
Tim, I'm just going to interrupt real quick.
It's the main topic. The second is,
If we could just open the public comment period for items not on the agenda, that's great.
I'll be right there. And the second one is sort of a discussion on meeting frequency. So that's our agenda. My goal is to get this done in an hour and a half. So I just want to put that out there for folks. We'll see how it all works out. So now we'll entertain public comment for anything not posted on the agenda. And we ask that the comments be left to 3 minutes. And again, this is for non-agenda related items. So staff, any comments from the public?
So we do have some hands raised. So if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen or *9 if you're calling in. And I have just promoted Daniel Horowitz in the meeting and have 3 minutes. Daniel, if you'd like to unmute and make your comments, we'd love to hear them.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, everybody who donates their time. I'm on a commission. I understand how much work it is. You know, I come to the housing element with a unique perspective. I grew up in a housing project that was put right in the middle of a residential community in New York. And it was wonderful and it worked. And the people who had the houses, the private homes, didn't mind. And in terms of diversity, when we got enough money to move to the suburbs, we moved to Teaneck, New Jersey, which deliberately invited African Americans to join our white suburb and it remains integrated to this day, and it works just fine. My concern with how we are approaching this mandate from the state is we're divided among people who want to save Lafayette and have diversity, and they fight when we're all on the same page, because I'm that kid who was in that housing project. But let me tell you what's missing. I love Greg Wolf's suggestion at the meeting of discrete sites that work. I love Mac Peace's idea of a large parcel developed properly. My concern is when I grew up and I walked out of my apartment in Maspeth, there was grass. There were places for people to sit. There were playgrounds. I could walk safely to school. I could walk to my buses. If you're in La Fiesta Square in an apartment complex, where the heck are you going to safely ride your bike? When I let my kid out of my apartment and my kid has to walk anywhere, I'm afraid of cars on these crazy drivers. My wife was almost hit at 60 miles an hour by a car running the stop sign on Deer Hill. I'm not letting my kids go there. If you're going to build these houses without fighting the state, and I think we should push back on the state, for heaven's sake, put a little more money in and a little more time. We've got the best planning staff I know of. Let them come up with beautiful places so that kids like me don't feel like the people in the nice houses are advantaged, that they feel cared for, and we have just as good a place. It'll cost more money. Maybe we can't put as many houses in, but there's willy-nilly opportunity zones. Oh, there's a spot. There's a spot. The only way you judge a spot is let that developer who builds the apartments there put his own kids or grandkids in that apartment for 6 months, ride their bikes, walk around and play, and see how happy they are. And that's the standards I hope you can apply. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Good job. Any further comments, public comments?
I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, great. Then we'll move on to housekeeping. Are there any items that the group has that were housekeeping related? Sarah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Anything else from the group? Hearing none, we will move on to commissioner activity reports. So is there anything that individuals would like to report to the group on that you feel appropriate to share, outreach and so on, outside of what we've already talked about?
I have been reaching out to students around in Ahwahnee and at Campo to get more input on the mission statement survey. I feel like it's really important to get the student voice, and to some extent with AP tests and finals and all of that, people are really busy and aren't gonna spend time trying to contribute unless if we really spread the word about this. So yeah, I've been emailing people and I'm drafting some Instagram posts, and that will be exciting. I hope to get more youth in the mission statement and get more youth voice.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Any other outreach to share? Yes, Stella, please.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to share that I have been reaching out to my own networks also through La Miranda Families, which is a rather large Facebook group. It comprises all of Lunda, but of course there's a lot of Lafayette residents. And so I've posted announcements for the workshops there.
Great. Terrific. Thank you very much. Any other items to share, outreach, discussions? Okay. Well.
Christine has her hand raised.
Sorry?
Christine has her
I'm sorry.
hand raised.
Please.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that I did have a meeting with Save Lafayette today. And I also was at a small get together of Happy Valley residents, probably about 50 people last week, to discuss the housing in Lafayette, and Cam Birch was there, and we had a nice discussion. So I just wanted to let you know that we I was able to get quite a bit of outreach on that day, last Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else from the group? Going once, twice. Okay, then I think we roll into our first presentation relating to the housing element, and for that, I will turn it over to staff.
Share my screen here. Okay, so we want to give a brief sort of recap of our engagement that we've done so far and kind of look ahead a little bit as well. So the efforts that we've done and the outcomes of the workshop, we wanted to discuss additional outreach and engagement activities that we're anticipating, highlight our sort of next steps and timeline, and then also get some additional feedback from this group. So as most of you know, we've done some pretty extensive outreach and information providing to the public, as well as input gathering. So we have our website, we have which has a bunch of information and background information, including all of these public meetings, recordings, and materials. We have our Engagement HQ, which is our online platform for obtaining information. We have 15 activities, forums, ideas walls, surveys, mapping, lots of different things. 340 registered users, and our mission statement is up on that same platform as well. We've hosted 6 Housing Element 101 sessions to inform the public about what the housing element is. We've done a general plan and a housing element introduction video. We've done a Vistas article, or almost the entire Vistas was related to the general plan. We've also done our direct mailings, right, to get the word out as well. We've done a walking tour and video, and then we just completed our 4 workshops. So those 4 workshops were, as you know, sort of from broad perspective down to narrow, and it was sort of an opportunity for collaboration and problem solving with the community. We had 577 registrants total and 385 attendees. Our peak attendance was the last workshop, number 4. We had a total of 118 folks at one point. We also have parallel activities online, so if people were not able to attend the meeting, they are able to engage in the activity and provide their input that way. And many of those are still up and available. In fact, all of them are. And the recordings of each of the events are also on the planlafayette.org website. So that gives the presentation as well as the report outs. And the written document of the report outs was in your packet as well. So our 3rd workshop was the density allocation workshop. That was sort of the balancing the budget for the regional housing needs allocation, showing where densities might be accommodated in the city, kind of giving a broad brush idea about where people would like more or less density if we are required to plan for it. We have 13 plans that are submitted so far. And then this activity is still available on Engagement HQ, so you can, anyone in the public, any individual can go and input their own personal plan and kind of provide their input that way. We're anticipating that it would be up and running through June 8th. The last workshop was the opportunity site identification. So we had a worksheet to go through some of the major criteria, which we need to evaluate to see whether or not a site could be considered an opportunity site. We've also uploaded or created a map activity on Engagement HQ, which allows individuals to place pins in particular locations where they think there are available opportunity sites. 29 sites have been identified so far on the site, and it's again still open and available. We're anticipating through June 15th, where at which point staff will take that information, export it, and will evaluate each and every through June 8th, we'll export the information, evaluate it, and vet it through the full criteria that the state requires, and then provide that information to the GPAC at its June 15th meeting. So just kind of big picture in terms of the workshop outcomes, we had significant participation, as you can see in the chart. We had lots of people registered, and a significant number of people attended. Lots of viewpoints and different opinions, as you can see in the report out from each of the workshops. We think that there was a lot of education and understanding that came out of it, as well as input and feedback from the community. And just wanted to highlight that engagement is ongoing. That wasn't sort of the first or last time to participate, and the analysis of that engagement is forthcoming. So we'll be bringing that. And this is actually a screenshot from the Remo event to see all the little people at their tables discussing the different topics. So that was fun. So in January, staff brought to the GPAC an engagement strategy with a list of activities. We've completed many of those activities, in fact, almost all of them. The ones remaining on that list are a visual preference survey, which are essentially sort of images that kind of help people identify what their preferences are as it relates to the built environment. So that's going to be kind of aesthetics, architecture, landscaping, sidewalks, that kind of thing. And then the other item is the stakeholder interviews. So this is small group interviews with specific stakeholders to understand their interests. So in addition to those two items, we wanted to kind of talk with the General Plan Advisory Committee to see, what else we need to do, who have we not reached, what other information is needed in order for the goals, policies, and programs to be better informed from public feedback. And then when we think about what else we need to do, maybe we should think about sort of the timeline, when summer break is, and then the timeline needed to formulate recommendations to the Planning Commission, as well as the overall timeline of the housing element as well. And then also staff capacity to organize and create those opportunities, as well as GPAC's participation in these events. So staff is suggesting that we do at least 2 additional activities. One is an open house at the Lafayette Library and Learning Center, which would essentially be a physical manifestation of the online workshops that we did to reach those folks that are not online. So we would set up tables and stations that would kind of run through each of the activities and allow people to kind of progress in order and have staff there to facilitate. So that would be, in theory, an open house, so from maybe 4 to 8 p.m. And just allow people to come as they will. And then we also feel like we haven't quite reached the youth entirely, and so we were wondering if coordinating a specific youth event would be a useful addition to our process. So in terms of next steps, we just want to highlight the timeline again and kind of keep that in the back of our mind as we continue. We do have the deadline for the BART bill in mid-2022, and then the housing element overall at January 31st, 2023. So essentially the end of 2022. So this, and we're kind of getting close to halfway through 2021. So we do need to think about, kind of, where the community engagement aspect sort of ends a little bit, and then we kind of organize and understand that and use that to inform our decisions, recommendations to Planning Commission, which will of course be another sort of public hearing process. Just wanted to kind of help in organizing how we think about the housing element, that is sort of in 3 separate sections. One is sort of the background data, which is really the demographics, the housing needs, our historic productions, or the context for housing in Lafayette. And then section 2 would be the goals, policies, and programs. So these are big picture ideas and how we plan to implement them. And then the third section would be the land use plan. So that's more of the specific zoning and opportunity sites that we're discussing. So just looking forward for this group, we're in May now. We are sort of moving forward with our public engagement and asking any additional public engagement that's needed. In June, we'd be doing any additional engagement that is recommended by the committee. Beginning this is synthesis of that public feedback and bringing it back to GPAC in a way that's kind of understandable and usable. And then starting our review of the goals, policies, and programs that are in the housing element. And then July, we'll be doing sort of the background data element. And then in August, going to the Planning Commission with that background data recommendations. And then September, continuing with our review of the goals, policies, and programs. So what we're asking from you this evening is kind of just maybe do a little bit of self-reflection. We can talk about how we think that the workshops went, but also just kind of thinking more broadly about, which stakeholders or groups have we missed, what other forms of engagement are needed, is the level of participation that we've received so far, is that sufficient? And if not, how can it be improved? And then should we, in fact, do the open house and youth-specific events that we are recommending? So I'll stop sharing and turn it back over to Vice Chair Cervantes.
Thanks very much. That was really helpful. Maybe in a bit we go back to the questions. It might be helpful to put them back on the screen, but I thought it might be useful just to kind of, since for us to catch up on the last two workshops we had, I think just to get people's reaction to it, observations, thoughts, because they were pretty meaty. And I mean, for a Zoom session, really kind of dense. So I just kind of thought I'd see what people takeaways on all that before we kind of talk about maybe next steps. Matt Pease?
Yeah, Jim, I thought they were pretty good. I think every table is unique given the people that sit there. But in the ones that I had, I thought there was a good discussion. People were learning things. There were some good suggestions. I think people were trying, even though they're frustrated with these numbers. They're trying to see where they can fit it in. Particularly the last one or the second last one, we were trying to put the numbers together and where we would put the housing. I think that was an eye opener, at least for the table that I was at. The very last one about the site selection, I'm not sure whether that was as valuable. It was tough to get that, to really think about scaling that out. And we kind of got down in the weeds in individual sites, but I thought the third one was particularly useful, in my opinion.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Beth, please.
Hi. Yeah, I was in the fourth one, which was a little technologically challenging for members of the group and myself. But what was interesting is everybody came to this group wanting to help and wanting to actually look at different sites around town. There were a couple people who were really knowledgeable about real estate and kind of kept our team away from areas they knew that were not going to be available or not up for sale or not zoned properly. And then we had some people on our committee also that were really motivated to look for housing sites outside of the downtown area. And we also had a contingent, actually all of us agreed on the importance of open space and parks as we plan for and look for new opportunity sites. So it was very, very helpful. I think we probably didn't have enough time. Again, because everybody came in with a different level of knowledge. You had to bring everybody up to speed, even though the intro was very good. So we had to encourage people to go and try it on their own, but actually would have been a little easier, longer, which I can't believe I'm going to say. But I found it really helpful and I got a lot of good information. And teens are a hard group to engage in the community, especially this time of year. We may be better off going to the schools or the parents clubs, perhaps in the fall, and some of you will know that better than I would, but just a thought. Or you can come to the library, they're there every day after school.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts or reflections on the sessions? Don't see any other. Oh, Stella, please, and then the mayor.
Yeah, I facilitated two of the sessions. I think workshop 2 and 4, and I agree with the comments about just the technology being a bit of a hindrance. It's unfortunate. I think a lot of us are used to doing virtual meetings, but the Remo is just different all around than Zoom and other media. I think that what I noticed was that there weren't that many parents of younger families. So I imagine people who might be, having children who are in the preschool through high school ages. And it may be that the time of the workshops was difficult. I don't know if there's any other times that are good, but I've been trying to think about ways to reach out to those groups who are just really, really, really busy, especially with at-home distance learning, managing both jobs and being, I guess, kind of like teachers' aides in the home for their kids who are doing work on Zoom.
Yeah. Okay.
I keep thinking, but I don't have any ideas yet.
Okay. Mayor Kendall.
Hey, yeah. So I do want to agree with Stella in terms of the feedback that I got for the tech. That some of the people really, really struggled, and so I think that it does make it sense to have at this point we may be able to have an in-person meeting at some point, which might help for those that are not understanding the tech as well as others. My big thought about the third one is that I'm sadly have to, for me, I'm disqualifying all the results because it was set up in a biased fashion, in my opinion, because the opportunity sites were set up like we were presented at council, that forced the answer to be 115 downtown, if that's what you wanted, which is what council does not want. It forced people to put housing, if there had been a solution available that would have allowed us to either keep our current zoning or just upzone a little bit, I think the answers would have been different. And so had the presentation been, and I tried to talk to staff beforehand, I have to be honest, I did. I challenged them before this, is to try, what were we looking for? What was the feedback we wanted? Was it that we wanted, I thought the idea is we wanted to find out where people would be comfortable with more density, not specifically trying to answer this question that was posed in such a way that they only had wrong size building blocks, right? And so you never got the real answer of if a person could choose to only go downtown or only go to BART or whatever or distribute, you couldn't really get there because the numbers were so stacked in a way that may not reflect reality and is definitely not what council wanted. And so I'm struggling because I think that the spreadsheet that came out of that with the numbers where people were happy with things, I know talking to people afterwards, it's like, is that really what you want? And they go, no, I don't really want that. I just had to do it because this is what the game made me do. And I think we missed, to be honest. I think we missed. And I think a better way to phrase it should be sought out in terms of what's the goal. It's not necessarily to, fit this particular puzzle. It's what do you want? Where would you want density? Make it much more relative rather than absolute kind of stuff. I don't know. I unfortunately, I didn't get the answers that I think we wanted to get. So that's my feedback.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments or reflections on the two sessions?
I didn't go to the other one's not up yet. The fourth one isn't online, and I wasn't allowed to go, so I didn't see it.
Okay.
And actually, I do have a question. I didn't see the review of that in the upcoming meeting schedules, and I think it's really important that we do review that one, right, and talk about the opportunity sites because that's the hardest one, right? And so it seems like that should be the ongoing thread from here on out, and then add the other pieces on top of it, right? Like that's the one that we hit every time, and then we also build upon those other ones as we go. But I don't think ignoring it until later is most likely a mistake because it's a nuanced conversation.
Yeah, and I might chime in. Still, I know you got your hand up. No, that's. I was going to say that. Well, let me do this. Stella, did you have your hand up again? I want to make sure. But
I did, but I think Christine may have also. I don't know who's first.
Can't see. Can't tell on this thing.
Yeah, Christine does. Can I speak?
Please.
Okay. So my feedback for, and this is because I've experienced it on the third one myself, a lot of tech problems. And then on the fourth one, I've gotten reports back from participants. And Burton Valley had a power outage during part of the event. And I know at least 5 people that were not able to get back on. So I feel like the tech on this has been challenging for a lot of the participants. I'm hoping that an in-person one would be good, and I wouldn't even mind doing another one with a Zoom, perhaps a more familiar platform, and then we could use breakout rooms possibly. Also, I have to say that I agree with Mayor Kendall about the amount of housing that the people were forced to put in. I think 115 is pretty high, and I think pretty unrealistic. So I was a little bit, I kind of wish we didn't have to go that high. And I'm not really sure if we're trying to figure out if density and where density should be put, if that was the right way to do it. So maybe we can try to figure out if we did do another Zoom session, for example, or even in person, if we could kind of work around something that's a little bit more, and that's the other thing too, because you know these places may not actually be built. So just because we're upzoning, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And I think saying 115 is just too high of a number. I think we really need to look at something that's a little bit more. I don't know how to say it, but something that they can envision better, and then think about where the density would be appropriate, and then we can add on that later if we needed to. But I just feel like we need to start with smaller, more realistic numbers. So anyway, and then also I agree with the availability of the Burton Valley parents. Most of my parents in our area either had on the third workshop, there was open house for Stanley, and then there was an open house for Burton Valley Elementary on this last Thursday. So I'm losing a lot of, I think, potential participants for that. So I would like to rethink maybe when we do the next in-person one, and then possibly even set up another one that's Zoom for people that missed the other ones, and maybe simplify it a little bit. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you. And I pulled up the, I can now see the hands, so thank you. Carol, Stella will come back to you, but I think let me get Carol and then Dawn.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Christine having 2 grandkids at Akalani's. It's a very, finals are next week. They're on the computer, their mom and dad working at home. It was just too much. I've heard from a lot of my daughter's friends. They just, you know, it was just too much, especially with the new platform, even though most of them are pretty, you know, do work on the computer, pretty literate. It was just another thing to do, and everybody's so stressed about finals. So I think that was a problem. And then a little aside just about GPAC, talking to people who were at the tables was to me a little different flavor than what I could pick up just hearing the people reporting what was at the table. So the flavor of the table discussions, a lot of us on GPAC are not privy to. We you know, we didn't get that. And I'm sorry I couldn't participate, but I had a lot of problems with the computer in and out, and I couldn't do it. So I think a lot of us miss like I said, the flavor of the conversation, or the passion, or the, you know, how it was discussed. So those are my 2 cents.
Okay. Great, thank you, Carol. And then Dawn, and then Stella.
Yeah, my 2 cents. Did we, or when we do the in-person meeting at the library, I would suggest that we do reach out to Lafayette. Has at least 2 areas of affordable housing that I'm aware of, right next to the post office annex, and then behind the theater, those houses. I think we should make a diligent effort to make sure those people are aware that these things are being discussed. And then I know at our Senior Service Commission, really the only thing we've done is the Senior Service Commission is aware of this. We are right now in the process of changing the director. Maureen's last day is today or very near future. And there is a large mailing list. And I think that if we were to send that out and say there's a meeting at the library, I know when we did things trying to make Lafayette a age-friendly city, we had a lot of people that came to the library to study what we might do to make the city more appropriate for seniors. So I would ask that we particularly reach those two groups with either some kind of a memo or just a paper document to their respective residents and a mailing to the seniors on the mailing list that the Senior Service Commission has.
Okay, great. Thank you, Don. And Stella.
Yeah, I just want to make one more comment. I did not facilitate or attend I believe it was workshop 3, the density allocation simulation, but I tried it at home. So I conducted a little mini workshop, and my spouse got kind of flummoxed by something, which was that when he looked at 2 zones or 2 areas that were relatively similar in area, like 1 and 2 or 3 and 5, and then when he incremented the dwelling units by 5, what didn't seem like they were in sync. And so in other words, like when he incremented, I think it was 3, downtown core north of Mount Diablo, from 35 to 40 dwelling units per acre, it went from only by 18 units that you gained, whereas in 5, which is East End north of Mount Diablo, he incremented from 35 dwelling units per acre to 40 and got 47. So he thought, well, there's a denominator that's different, but what's going on? I want to know more about this. And I think I remember we talked about this in our last meeting, that the parcels that are underneath these zones or areas are only the last housing elements opportunity sites. Is that correct, or am I confused or mistaken?
So it is based on an acreage that is based on opportunity sites that have already been identified as potential based on the state's criteria. And so obviously that can change and would change, assuming we get additional opportunity sites through the 4th activity in the workshop, identifying additional sites. So it was sort of we had to start somewhere, right? There's like, we could use sort of any number to start, but it was sort of the baseline. So it
okay. So the baseline that's been recently reviewed, not from the last housing element.
Some of those sites are included, but some of them we cannot include based on the state's criteria.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, very briefly, the preliminary op sites that have been identified, which were the basis for the exercise, are those 5th cycle sites which have not been redeveloped already. So many of those have been redeveloped. We can't count them necessarily again, but if the C of O won't happen, we can continue to count them. But we've also added some called low-hanging fruit, more obvious ones that we believe we can easily justify to the state. And now our task and commitment to the council and everyone here is to try to identify as many opportunity sites as possible, because as the mayor said, the council does not want 115 units per acre in the downtown. Staff does not want 115 units in downtown. But at this preliminary early stage, that's potentially what it might take if we're not able to identify more opportunity sites. So those are directly correlated. And so what you were seeing in your household was reflective of not all the areas in town, even if they were all divided acreage equally, will yield similar results. Some areas may already be built out to a much higher degree. Some may be very good going concerns of commercial enterprise, et cetera. So East End has more opportunity sites on it, historically has, and I think will probably carry forward. into the next cycle. But that is our utmost task before us.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
And John, I see your hand up still. Did you have?
No, I'm sorry. Take it down.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, reflections on the prior sessions? And to chime in, because I was moderated a table at actually all of them, but I really thought that this third session where the budgeting model was adapted for Lafayette's housing planning, I thought was actually brilliant in conception. I think that we're going to come back, I think at some point, to come back to this buffer discussion for purposes of the exercise. It was set at 50%, as I recall, not the 60% in the EAR, but not the 15%, which might be HCD's bottom. So, so there's going to be a big discussion in there, I suspect, at some point about what's the right level for that. It was interesting. My group solved the problem, and we only upzoned downtown from 35 to 40 or maybe 45 in some spots, but the trade-off was putting housing on BART and loading up on the De Silva site. And one thing that struck me in the exercise of the third session was every group put housing on BART, and I didn't quite expect that. And of course, a lot of groups put housing on the De Silva site. So I think it's all a process that we'll see play out, and it might be worth running again if we can hone in on maybe more opportunity sites and maybe get to a buffer that it doesn't have maybe a padding in it. We'll see. Mike Kim, you're saying there's a lot of ringing sites somewhere.
Yeah, there is.
Somebody has wind chimes.
You know what? I have to pardon myself here because the door is open and the wind is blowing out here in Spring Hill Valley. So if you could bear with me for 1 second, my apologies. Hang on.
Look at the chat.
I turned off the Led Zeppelin album, and I thought that would do it for you guys. But instead, I got the wind chimes for you. The other thing I was going to say in a more serious vein is that on the fourth exercise, I went through the HCD document, which is like 44 pages and mind-numbing. And I thought the staff did a good job in trying to condensing that down to a Cliff Notes version, which is what the tables walk through. And I thought in that regard, it was sort of helpful to get a sense as to what are the different considerations that apply in looking at opportunity sites. And I suspect the dynamic was really different in each table. In ours, we actually looked at a residential site because the owner proffered it. And then we looked at some downtown stuff. So I thought, it's not, I think for me, it felt like very broad side of the barn with all this, but at least it gives us a better feel for what the interplay is. So maybe as we think through in future sessions, things like what's the appropriate buffer level, opportunity sites, and so on, think about the trade-offs. I think at least it gives us some context. And I thought that if you think about it in that framing, I thought it was helpful. And that's was my take on this. I think I see two hands, and Mayor Kendall's got a hand up, and then
Carol had hers up first.
Okay, Carol, you go first.
Thank you, Mayor. Where do the other considerations, for instance, the De Silva site is the only site left for a ball field in Lafayette. We lost the one at the terraces. If the De Silva one goes, then there's no more ball field. There's so much talk about kids biking and pollution, and yet here we all drive to Wilder. If you've ever been to Wilder, 5 fields there, we all go there. There's no way kids gonna ride a bike to Wilder. So how do we consider some of these other elements? I mean, if we put housing on De Silva, probably the ball field's gone. So, how do we consider some of these other elements, such as air pollution? All right, that was a big deal for Deer Hill. So we're going to put other properties along Deer Hill. We better test the air quality. I mean, how do we bring these other things in?
Sorry, my mute button. So, so I think some of those things are part of the CEQA analysis, the environmental analysis, and some of them are part of your deliberations as you're going through and discussing what makes sense, right? And what the goals are and how we fit those goals and priorities into what ultimately the plan is. So that's all part of your deliberations. So at this point, we're just getting the broad sense of where people are comfortable or less comfortable with things happening, and then this group will be doing that work.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Mayor Kendall.
So I when you said everybody put BART, and I know they did, but after talking to some people, that they told me they only put BART because they didn't want to go to 115 in downtown. And that's the question that you want to extract. You want to go, I know people want BART, given whatever opportunity, instead of playing this game that kind of faked them out, it'd be better just to ask them. Right. So I'd be very careful with jumping to those conclusions based on that argument, when it was, like Stella said, it was basically almost impossible to get what you wanted downtown. And so I think that I would just caution us from jumping to conclusions based on the results from that exercise.
Yeah, that's fair.
Thanks.
I think it'd be really interesting, again, if we had a more complete set of opportunity sites from this is the work going on, and then honed in on the buffer. I think you'd get then you could really sort of tease it out, and then get a better sense of those trade-offs. So I think we're about done with the conversation. Maybe one last one, Stella.
Yeah, just one last thing about outreach. On the main page, the planlafayette.org page, Engagement HQ is the button there on the right side, and it's a little cryptic if you're coming to it and you haven't been at GPAC meetings and heard Engagement HQ as a phrase. So I just have a suggestion to maybe make it more prominent, make it larger, and maybe say something like, give your input here, or speak up here, or just something to get someone to actually click on it. Because right now it almost looks like it's just kind of a column header, just as an orange box.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Matt.
Yeah, Jim, did you want to talk about Engagement HQ now, or do you want to hold off on that for a little while?
I think maybe it's a good segue. And I do want to get to the questions that Sarah posed at the end of the presentation too. So do you want to have a point on Engagement HQ?
Yeah, I looked at the numbers and I got a little lost in the spreadsheets, but it looks like, and Sarah, keep me honest here, or Renata, you said about 330 to 340 registered users. Does that include the missions survey that we've put on there, or is it just for the housing element?
So Engagement HQ is the platform that is hosting all activities for general plan, overall, the housing element, and the mission statement update. So we received over 100 responses on the survey, and participants are required to register for that. So that 100 or so people are included in that 340 registrant figure.
I continue to think that that's just a miserable response. And we've wasted a lot of money if that's all we're going to get out of it. There's two reasons I think we're getting the lousy response. And I think it's one, maybe the content's not very good. That could be part of it. The other one, I think this registration issue is something that deters people from engaging in it. I think people tend to like to do it anonymously. And I understand from staff that there's good tools to make sure people aren't stuffing the ballot box, which obviously that's not happening. They can tell it by the IP address. And I think it's got some other tools in there to address it. That may be something we want to think about, Jim, in trying to help get more participation is do away with that registration. I think that's part of what's holding us back.
So I see Namratha kind of chuckling here. That was the end of the last session.
Her and I are partners in this thing.
Okay, and there's a motion made, and which failed to drop the registration through. I kind of think we've gone there, and maybe there's other ways to facilitate involvement. Beth, did you put your hand up? I couldn't quite tell.
No, I was part of your group. I was just agreeing with you that we should do away with registration.
On the first losing side of a motion in this group.
And we can tell when people from outside of Lafayette are using it. I mean, the IP address will tell us that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we kind of went through this in the last time. I mean, I get the point, but I mean, maybe there's other ways to sort of like encourage engagement. And maybe we're just going to see where we are. I mean, we have time. There's a timeline in this process. If we're maybe get to the point at the next session in June, we're just not satisfied with the output. Maybe at that point we say, okay, based on now 6 weeks or whatever it's been of this, we're not happy. We need to do something different. We maybe at that point make that move. That might be a appropriate conversation there. But the one observation I had looking at the data on the engagement sheets, I couldn't quite tell how many people had signed up, whether it's 300 or 600. There's a number there of 630. But the overwhelming number of people who indicated they were homeowners, which kind of makes sense. And I went through and I actually counted the renters and came up with 14, which if it's 600 and some registrants is 2%, or if it's 300 and some, maybe it's 5%. But it's a very small number. And I think that's something, it's 20% of the housing stock in Lafayette is rental property. And I think their constituency that should be heard. And Don, I think you had talked about people in some of the affordable housing properties. So maybe there's an outreach there, because I really want to make sure we've listened to as many different groups as we can in the community. That to me is the key to coming up with the best possible approach. So that may be something to try to think through. What's appropriate outreach there? Because there's a part of the community that we're not really hearing much from, as far as I can tell. So, anything else like on engagement HQ before we move on to the point that the question had? Namratha, please.
I just have like a quick question about engagement HQ and the registration, and I promise I won't get into the registration debate. But so I tried to register, and apparently you're only allowed to register once per email address. So like my email address, for some reason, maybe I registered like half registered. And so when I tried to register, like really, I couldn't register. I had to like use a different email address, which was like long and complicated. And I don't really want to use my school email address for a lot of things. So that was a little bit annoying and confusing. Like, I just have a question. Is there a way to get rid of that and like have multiple registrations per email address? Like as long as the usernames are different, or does that one registration per email address have to be there?
Yeah, so that's built into the system where it is your account is tethered to an email address. So if anyone has issues with registration, they can reach out to Bing the Table directly, which is the company that provides Engagement HQ, or staff can look into it for you and resend an activation email, or we have a little bit of control in that and helping through that.
Yeah, great. And also I definitely second the idea about making the Engagement HQ button more public and kind of that put your input here, whatever. And maybe we should also put in kind of not like a helpline, but like if you need help with technical issues or registration, here contact staff or contact like a phone number or an email, so people like know that they aren't really like alone when they're facing issues with registration or with Engagement HQ or with Remo or with anything technical.
Those are good suggestions. For those of us who are challenged by wind chimes, that would be much appreciated. I think maybe if we could move on. Sarah, you had posed a set of questions for this group to consider at the end of the presentation. And I think it'd be helpful to go back to that, maybe put that up so you can go through it, have our discussion, and then we'd have public input on that.
Jim, I believe Mike has his hand raised.
Oh, Mike, I am so sorry. And
that's okay. All right, I just have a clarifying question. Did we walk away with some action items to Mayor Candel's criticism of Session 3? It sounded like there were some issues there, important issues there that need to be resolved or addressed. Did I miss that?
Well, let's see. There, and maybe this was my assumption, and let's talk this through, that with maybe actually getting a clear set of opportunity sites and clarity on where we're going to go with the buffer, we get closer to what might be a model that's closer to, quote, reality. But that's an assumption. And so maybe that's worth talking through and seeing where we go with that. Not on Mayor Candel, you raised the questions. I guess what, in your view, gets us there to address it?
I think trying to figure out the question we're trying to answer, and what do we really want from that exercise. I think approach it that way instead of this what we did. And what are you trying to get at? It's like I think what you're trying to get at is, where would people want to put the density, right? And not saying exactly how, or exactly what size, but given the preference, where do you want to put the density, right? And that, I think that's a much better, if you start with that, then you can form how you present it to people. Because, right? And so, like, to rank them or something, if you had a choice, to put them, where would you want to put the density, and rank the sites and where you would want to put them or something.
Okay.
Or give people, just, not numbered building blocks, but I would rather put bigger things here than here. Right. And I think that might extract what we're trying to get, rather than the exercise that did have some, the things that maybe force people to do things that they wouldn't have done otherwise. Because that's what the answer is, right? That's what we're trying to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
That's an idea.
Okay.
So if the committee would like, we can definitely set up another activity for folks to partake in. But I also just want to add kind of to where Vice Chair Cervantes was going, is that, this is an iterative process. And once we have that more refined idea of opportunity sites and a more defined buffer, we can revisit the balancing act activity as well with different geometries.
Yeah, I kind of think that alone would might drive a different conclusion, but I think it's worth thinking through, the perspective of looking at it from another way. So maybe we'll do this. I've kind of took a few notes here. That might be a good thing when Chris gets back in, just to talk through with her and maybe do some thinking for this. This might be something this group talks about again in the next session, perhaps. Like, what are ways to really address this? Because that's really key. I mean, that's going to be the key thing in this whole exercise. So, okay. Mike, thank you very much for kind of circling back on that. I appreciate it.
We do want to be.
And I think we've got Carol has got a hand up.
Sure.
So are you, Mayor, are you saying just put people put it wherever they want it?
Right.
No boundaries. I mean, if they want it all in the residential, they just do all of that.
Yeah.
That goes back to my wondering how is GPAC going to consider some larger, such as the mission statement. Okay, I mean, how many of our citizens want it in residential areas? How many want it near BART? I mean, if it's going to be way out in Burton Valley or Spring Hill, you get into, it's not close to transportation. I mean, it seems to me we have to have some parameters first before we can just go out and put it all over anywhere. I mean, I wouldn't want it in my neighborhood, but I might want it in the neighborhood next door to me. And the next door neighborhood probably wouldn't want it, but they'd want it in my neighborhood. I mean, if there's no parameters to this, why it doesn't even make sense. I mean, the whole community might say, we don't want it in residential areas, or we don't, it's all right if it's only 4 stories, but not if it's 7. I mean, it seems to me then it's just a free-for-all.
I think you have to, you're right. It can't be just, you have to have guidelines around it. And you're right. That would be very necessary to craft this in a way that where you don't just have an other and everybody's all over the place. So yeah, I agree. It can't just be loosey-goosey like that.
Yeah, and have something to do with our mission. We're doing the mission statement. I mean, to me, it has to sort of fit into the mission statement, or why are we doing that?
I kind of think that may be a bit different. My understanding on the exercise was we were kind of working within the confines of the programmatic EIR scenarios. I mean, there's 2 of them. I mean, and someone else in this group knows more about this than I do, but that we are sort of working within that outer envelope for the 2. Because I suppose one could say theoretically, look, just, you know, we'll instead of single family zoning, it'll be 4 units per parcel, problem solved. But that's not within the scope of the programmatic EIR. So I thought that was the constraint.
And that is true, right?
Yeah.
Yes. That would be the constraint. Okay. And I thought it was just going to be free for all.
And I think that makes, putting a constraint, I think makes sense, because that EIR process is ongoing. To do something outside the bounds, like, what are we doing here? So I think it's not willy-nilly. There's boundaries around this, and the boundaries are set by the programmatic EIRs, which have just started. That's my understanding.
And is that sort of what they did at the workshop? Or am I missing?
They did, but it was done in such a way that it didn't produce, I don't think it produced answers that would reflect what people actually wanted. And that's what I want. I want to know what they want, you know? And so rephrase the question to get what they want. And then we can make some conclusions on where we should be focusing efforts.
Okay.
And I think that there are a few additional constraints, right? If we can't find opportunity sites in a given area, but people want to put housing there, then that poses a challenge. But as we mentioned before, it's sort of an iterative process, right? So going through the opportunity sites will help us identify if there are other areas that we can increase or have, spread it out further, or what that looks like. So we will revisit.
Yeah. I want us to move on to the the questions that were at the end of the presentations. We could talk through them. And maybe, Sarah, it might be helpful if you could put them up, so remind us all of where we're going or where we need to go with this.
Sure. And so I just also want to remind about, we do want to open public comment for this item. And typically that's done before you do your deliberations, but I'm happy to put the questions back up.
Yeah, okay. So that's helpful. So as a rookie at this, so we had this discussion. We were going to move into this. It's all under the umbrella of the topic of housing element workshops, but if it's appropriate to open for public comment on what we talked about here, that would be helpful too, or else we could wait till the whole discussion's over. So
typically the public comment will help inform your discussion, generally speaking. So I would suggest doing it now.
Well, that would be great. So we would appreciate members of the public to provide a comment with respect to the conversation we've just had here. The request is that if you please try to keep that within 3 minutes, that would be very helpful. And so staff, is any public attendee indicated they'd like to make a comment?
Yes, a couple of hands are raised. If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, or *9 if you're calling in, and you'll be let in as a panelist, and you have 3 minutes. I just let in Grace Dixon, and then David Clark, followed by Dawn Eames.
Good evening. Shall I start?
Please.
Okay. First off, I just want to say, GPAC and staff, don't beat yourself up about over registration, no registration. We're not having enough engagement. Oh no. I mean, I feel like I kind of represent the community somewhat. I couldn't care more about this topic. I attend the meetings, but it's overwhelming. And getting involved, having an opinion, getting on the site and spending the time, it's all overwhelming. It's overwhelming for you, for GPAC, I would imagine. So don't beat yourself up as, oh no, what are we doing wrong? Registration, no registration. This is, how can we get them more? It's tough to get involved. So I just want to say that you're doing a great job. Remo is brilliant. I'm not a tech savvy person. My husband is, but that's not my field of expertise, but I figured it out and it's brilliant. Using Balancing Act was brilliant. I think these are all very creative approaches to a tough problem. However, the bottom line is this is such a big topic that I think it overwhelms the average person. So, you know, I'm still very much somebody who likes to put my boots on the pavement and walk the areas. So if there is any chance that we could walk from one end of town to the other with you, I would love it. That's what I do. And I've walked these sites, and you kind of have to go area by area, doing it at a table with 5 other people who might not know the sites. And I live on Monroe. It's basically downtown. So I know all these sites really well, but you know, to embrace everybody and kind of bring them in and say, this is what this site looks like. And these are the sight lines and these are the neighbors. And if there's any chance for that, I really embrace that. Also, I think fields and housing can happen at the De Silva property. And Carol, as you've taught me, and this quote resonates in my brain at least once a week, the time to build a park is before you build the housing. So I think both fields and housing can happen at De Silva very effectively because it is on the 4-lane road near the freeway. And the neighbors, as far as the ones I've talked to, are very cooperative and interested in that happening. Then finally, to agree with Susan's points, our mayor, looking at the lots by lots was very difficult, at least for me as a resident, and I'm a long-term resident, 26 years. I think of areas more as streets or zones. So for instance, when I was waving the Golden Gate Way flag, I can't go lot by lot. I have to say, okay, this whole swath of Golden Gate Way really needs a renaissance. So what are we going to do with that? And so just, I know that's a lot coming at you, but I was listening to the whole time, and I just wanted to get all of that in there. And you guys are doing a fantastic job, but it's such an overwhelming topic right now for most people. So you're being very creative and trying to engage. And again, don't beat yourself up. You're being super creative, and I thank you for all of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Grace.
Hi, David, you are ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. And I'll follow up on what Grace just said. I'm kind of a policy wonk and kind of a numbers nerd, and I follow a lot of this stuff and I really enjoy it. But I probably have 5 or 6 or maybe 8 or 10 people that I know that are not going to do that, but they'll ask me, what does this mean? What does that mean? So for all the folks that, I realize that percentage of people that you're looking at may be kind of small, but there's probably a ripple effect going on as well. So that I think the message is at least from my perspective, it is getting out, because just for the reason that I'm talking to some of those folks. But what I wanted to say was, and Mayor Candell, what you said prompted this in me. When I heard tonight, which is a little disconcerting to me, I heard what I thought were some conclusions that had come out of those exercises. And that was not my understanding of what those exercises were intended to produce. My understanding was, particularly with the fourth group, was that it was an exercise to get us familiar with, that is us being folks outside the immediate planning process, with what the process involves, how difficult it is, what the challenges are, so that there's an appreciation for identifying opportunity sites, for example, but the overall big picture of finding all those units someplace in the city from the bigger perspective. And I'm not saying we don't have input, but I don't think that we should draw too many conclusions from those workshops 3 and 4, because the methodology, for one thing, was all over the place. I mean, I bumped myself off by accident and came back, so I was involved in 2 groups in exercise 4. One of them did 1 parcel and the other one did 6. So who knows if what the standards were to identify them. Anyway, I just think I think it's a little premature to draw too many conclusions as a result of those couple of exercises. And I just wanted to pass that on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. John, you are in the meeting if you would like to unmute.
Is my video, for some reason, my video isn't, oh, there it is. Okay, first of all, I wanted to join Grace in saying thank you to everybody that is putting so much time and effort and years, it appears, for this general plan, and the housing element in particular, working on that. Don Jenkins mentioned about stakeholders and groups being missed. I thought possibly a postcard to property owners specifically that would get out to seniors and anybody else that are not tech savvy, to be able to ask them, or in a survey, even written survey out to the people like they used to do years ago, decades ago, to find out what their opinions are, or whatever they want, whatever the committee wants to find out, I think would be helpful, and get to the seniors and other people that are not tech savvy. The other item I had were opportunity sites. I was sat at 2 different tables on 3 and 4 workshop, and several people mentioned that they have like 10 acres and they would be willing to talk to the city about offering their site for affordable housing. And I don't know if these people have reached out to the city or if the city's reached out to them, but another fellow said he had a large property he'd be willing to talk to the city about. And people wanting ADUs, if the city puts out there in some form or fashion advertising, basically saying, if you'd like an ADU on your property, please let us know so we can include those in the housing element numbers that are being mandated. And as far as stakeholder interviews, I'm a property owner on the south end of the East End district here. And Susie Kelly and/or Jeff Warner, I guess I'd like to make sure, and I guess to be able to talk to them specifically about what our needs and wants are. So thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised at this time. If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function.
I'm sorry, I know we aren't supposed to speak now, but I noticed that there were some public comment-like things in the chat. Should those people be also speaking at this time?
Yes, if they would like to make a public comment, they should raise their hand.
Thank you, Namratha. It's a little hard to follow the chat when you're trying to focus on the meeting, so it's good to speak your piece.
And I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Thank you. I want to do a time check. It's 7:15, and so I think my target was to get us to wrap up in at 7:30. I'm not sure we're going to make that target. I hope we don't go as long as a typical city council meeting does, but we'll see. So I think what we want to do is maybe at 7:30 check and see where people are at. But I do want us to get us back to the questions that Sarah, you raised in your presentation, because we have one other item here to talk about afterwards, having to do with looking at subsequent meetings. I do want to make sure we spend a few minutes on that. Thank you, Sarah. We talked a bit about some of these items I think already. What stakeholders or groups have we missed? And I just kind of, from notes I had, Don, you mentioned maybe people who are affordable housing residents, so maybe senior housing people, seniors we've talked about. I think we talked about youth. I mentioned renters. Any other groups, stakeholders in the community that we should be conscious of to make sure that we connect with them? Any thoughts from the group on that? And it's a little hard for me. Anna, please.
Thank you. I have a question and then 2 comments regarding that, Jim. Sarah, my first question is, of the 385 who attended the workshops, do you have a breakdown of who attended more than one? I was just curious because I remember this came up in your presentation last night to Planning Commission, and then I forgot to ask.
I do have lists of each of the attendees, the registrants and the attendees. It's not tabulated in sort of that way, but we could compare them to see.
Yeah.
I think there were several people who attended all 4.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, right? Start, broad, go more narrowed in. But Jim, I do have 2 comments I kind of tied together regarding who we missed. So twice in the last, I'll say, week and a half, I was approached at high school sporting events by people who were getting their information on GPAC strictly from Nextdoor. And when they approached me about it, knowing that I was on Planning Commission, we started talking about GPAC. And it was when I told them about the Plan Lafayette website, they didn't know about it, right? Like they were kind of surprised. I'm personally not a social media user. I don't have Nextdoor, I don't have Facebook, but I found that interesting. So I kind of feel that is a stakeholder group we are missing. And if there's a way to, I don't know how Nextdoor works, but sprinkle in more positive, go to the planning, website, go to Plan Lafayette. And then to tie into that is at both of these events were on Thursday nights at, 7:00, which means that maybe moving forward, I did like the idea that, I know like when I do public outreach through work, we try to vary the times, right? Because if you can't make it Thursday at 6:00, chances are you can't make it any of the Thursdays at 6. So if we do have a follow-up, that's maybe a Zoom or something else, or maybe the city, if we are able to have an in-person, maybe it's just a different time than Thursday at 6, just to capture a different audience. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have my hand up.
Okay, Carol, please.
Okay, I'm confused by the question. Which stakeholders or groups have we missed? Are we talking about the list? That they are not on the list? Because the people you've been talking about, seniors and youth and young families, they're all on the list. Got the list here. So are we, there a lot, all the PTAs are on the list, all the churches. So what are we talking about? Which groups on this list we have not contacted? Or are we talking about which groups should be on the list that are not on the list? What are we talking about exactly?
My sense is more the former than the latter. just speaking for myself on this, we do have the stakeholder list, and that's a good reference point, Carol. Thank you for referencing that. I think it was in the four, we've had the multiple Housing 101 sessions, and then the four kind of community sessions that just wrapped up. Kind of thinking about that, are there groups that we just maybe feel we haven't heard from? I mean, there was, I think will likely be outreach to some of these groups or constituencies in, in maybe more like interview type sessions. We need to think that through, I think, for some of these groups that are on that stakeholder list. But, just kind of broad brush, just based on interactions we've had thus far in these sessions, are we missing groups? I think that's the main point here.
Well, I would say we are. There are 9 churches on the list. I'm not familiar. I know in my church there's not been outreach that you're talking about. Then the developers, there are 7 developers on the list. Have we reached out to any of them? And then the nonprofits, there's A through J. And some of these I know we have not reached out to. So, and then of course the schools is a huge list, A through V. I don't know what 26 letters the alphabet says, about 22. We haven't reached out to them specifically. Okay. So what are we gonna, if we miss them, what are we gonna do about these?
So I think maybe with respect to that list, it maybe makes sense. There we can actually maybe do some targeting, wherein GPAC members might be potentially tasked to sort of reach out to those groups specifically, at least give them the opportunity to say something if they wish. Again, I'm thinking this may be a little more broad brush here, which is, just again, based on the recent sessions we've had, are we not hearing certain voices that we should try to try to focus on? I think that's the conversation here.
And any suggestions you might have about how to reach those folks.
Right. I mean,
I think we'd have to go contact them and ask if they would like a session with some of us. Would be one way.
Yeah. Okay. I'll make a note of that. We've also talked about some sort of a postcard mailing. There are means by which the city does communicate the Roundup, the Vista. Anna brought up social media. I saw a note from Mike on that. I think that may be something we should try to drill into. I mean, I look at Nextdoor sporadically, mainly to check on the lost cats and dogs. But again, that may be something that people focus on, and we should be paying attention to that. So I want to move this group along here because we're now almost at 7:30. Real quick, any other groups or like forms of outreach that people think we should be paying attention to? Namratha? And then Stella.
So during the public comment, this idea of having a live walking tour was mentioned.
Yep.
That we could do this neighborhood-wide live walking tour. I know we had the recorded one, which was pretty cool, or the self-guided one, but having an actual staff member and a couple of GPAC members there on this event where people walk through the sites, are able to ask questions and be in person, would be pretty cool. And I think a lot of people would be really interested in that. Mm-hmm. Also, I am definitely 100% in support of the youth event, and I think we should definitely have that, maybe on Zoom or on Remo, because I think we'd all love Remo. It's really cool looking. So, yeah, and I think that's all I've got.
Okay, and I've got Stella and then Dawn.
Yeah, thanks. So I would certainly be willing to reach out to the Lafayette School District community. That would be the K through 8 community. The last day of school is the 27th of May, which is next Thursday. But there's one last opportunity, I think, to reach people in a broad way, which is most, if not all, the school PTAs have a newsletter that they usually put out over the weekend. And I think the deadline is probably going to be somewhere between tomorrow or Thursday for submissions. And I'd be happy to put something in there. The only thing, I guess, I've thought about this for the past couple of weeks. The only thing holding me back is, well, what should I say? So at this point, there's no workshops to point people to, but I'm wondering if maybe just a quick blurb and a link to Engagement HQ would be the most effective. And then maybe to put someone's name and contact down for contact with questions. But again, I don't know who that is. I think I'd be okay with it, but we're talking about probably about 2,400 students total. So maybe over 1,000 parents.
That will fill up the inbox pretty quickly.
It might, or maybe not, sadly.
Sarah, I think there's a follow-up there.
We can give you some language and we can direct people to the generalplan.org, generalplan@lovelafayette.org email address. So
email, perfect. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Jim, sorry, can I chime in on that one? Still, feel free to reach out to me because when this first started, I did do that through Stanley, through Burden Valley, tried to do it through Alcalanes, and they weren't unable to per their policy, but then they ended up doing the follow-up news article in their paper. So I do have a couple contact names that at least could get you started. I don't have for all of the schools. Yeah. If you
Sure. Yeah,
I have.
Okay, I'll do that. I have Spring Hill and Stanley, but yeah, I need to hunt up the others. So I'll contact you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a great idea. Stella, thank you very much. Then I've got Don.
Well, just very briefly, I think the reality is no matter what we come up with, when we finally come up with something that appears to be real, you're going to find people coming out of the woodwork. We are kind of circling the wagons right now. And until there is actually something that somebody's feeling their ox is gored, it is not. We are going to be doing a lot of this, which is fine. But I think we need to be realistic and just recognize that when we finally get to something that is really meaningful, that's when you're going to get all the responses.
Okay, good observation. I'm mindful that we are just a tick shy of 7:30. I think that we had all agreed on a protocol wherein at this point we would take a vote to see if people want to continue. That's my recollection. And I don't know if we need to do a roll call on all that, but I guess the question might be, are people willing to go on to 8 o'clock and try to make it a hard stop by then? So,
I'm okay with that.
That's good.
Okay, I'm okay.
I'm okay with that.
Folks are good? Okay. All right. So we will work to keep it within 8. Okay, I think we've gotten some really good thoughts here. I've been taking down notes. I'm sure that staff has as well, just sort of for follow-up. So I think we've talked about stakeholders we may have missed, outreach. Sarah, I think you had another couple of questions on your sheet, which I was remiss in not writing down beforehand. If you could please put that back up to make sure so we can check. Is the level of participation sufficient? If not, how can we get approved? These are all kind of related questions. And then an open house and youth-specific movement. Maybe take these last two together. Thoughts on the third question, level of participation? We kind of talked about this a bit. Namrat, I see your hand up.
Frankly, I don't feel like the level of participation is sufficient. Like, I know that there's like a ripple effect and like information is probably going around, but I like really wish people would come back and give us some input and participate in the activities. And I think we really need to be flexible in our offering of activities, because to some extent it's our job to make sure they participate. It's not really like their job to work around like hurdles and schedules to participate. So we really gotta kind of make outreach work in the way that people want outreach to work. So I feel like, I know in person may not be like the safest thing still, but new guidance is coming from the CDC, so we could try some in-person things like the library one. Sounds really exciting, like walking tours, other ways for people to participate that seem to engage them a bit more.
Okay. Meet them where they are. Other thoughts, comments on participation level and how can we improve it? And we've kind of touched on some of this. Susie, please.
Yes, hi. So I just wanted to kind of circle back to the question of the person who said that they'd like to meet with me personally, which I'd be very happy to do. But how do we do that and make sure that it's kept public, the comments? Do I provide my email address? I'm unsure of the protocol for that.
So you're welcome to create your own sort of email address that's GPAC specific. So a lot of our planning commissioners do that for for their sort of city business to keep it kind of separate from your personal. So I would encourage you to do that. But in the meantime, they can certainly reach out to us and we can forward their email to you.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And the commissioner report outs is also an opportunity to share outcomes from your conversation.
Hey, Jim.
Yes, Matt.
Matt, on the social media piece, I actually think we've done a decent job. I have seen it on Nextdoor and on Facebook a couple of times. I think the thing we're missing may be the frequency. Is there's a lot of noise out there. And I think that if we could have those sent out more frequently and do a more frequent bursts, I think it'll get to more people because people don't look at it every day. And I think if we could do that, we may see some more takers, would be my suggestion.
Okay.
I think too, the open house and youth event would be good, but I think you have to keep in mind to do it after school is out and finals are over. Next week is finals and sort of chaos.
I think so too. And, you know, mercifully, we may be getting towards the end of this phase of COVID, wherein we will be able to do things more together, which will be a godsend. And maybe all this is after June 15th. And, you know, the open house at the library, for me personally, seems like a really good idea. It's one way to get to people without them not having to do Zoom. And maybe after a year plus of shutdown, people might actually enjoy getting out and talking about stuff like this in the community. Who knows? I think the walking tour is a pretty neat idea. We just need to think how we do it. I think as I understand it from the Brown Act, we've got to be conscious of not having a quorum of GPAC members when we do those sorts of things. So that's just something to be mindful of, but that might be a takeaway here to see how we might do that. For those of us who are sort of more visual, you know, visually oriented. So any other thoughts, ideas here? Again, I've been taking notes and I'll work through this. Don, please.
The Chamber of Commerce is hosting a restaurant walk on the 22nd of June. And that's a real people walking to the restaurants. And they do get organized at one point. And if we were to have some postcards printed or some directions, those could be, I'm going to be participating. I'd be happy to hand out that information to the people who are there coming to that event. And I would encourage all of us to be at that event and hand out the cards to people that are interested in coming to Lafayette restaurants.
That's a great idea.
Great idea.
There's also I think a chamber coffee with the mayor coming up.
And there is there's one of those coming up this Friday.
There you go. So I think it's a great idea. And I think I saw some of the Lafayette Food and Wine Festival is coming back. Is that right?
Yeah, that's not till the fall though.
Okay. All right.
And they're not sure how that's going to be presented quite yet. That's
a work in progress.
Okay, Don, I'm jumping the gun here, so I'm sorry about that. I'm just getting excited about these things coming back. Okay, I think we've got enough grist for the mill here, maybe to work this through with staff, and maybe in the next session try to come back with something specific. That session will be in June. So at that point, we'll have greater clarity with respect to like the lifting of sanctions on people getting out. And we can maybe take it from there. Anything else on these topics before I take a comment?
Yes, Jim, I have one from Christine Rasmussen who says you're not seeing her hand.
Oh, God.
She'd like to ask, is there a survey being mailed out? I think that was one of the options. It's one of the options, mailing out a survey.
That's a good question. And my apologies to Christine for not, the chat thing was kind of blocking some of those.
The visual preference survey, I think she means.
Yeah. Surveys they're a lot of work to prepare. I know that from the one we did for the mission statement. Not a light undertaking. Someone has to do it. So I don't know if there's people who would volunteer to take that on, because it's a lift. And if you mail it, there's a cost. So we need to be clear about what we're trying to accomplish with that. It's work. I know that. And maybe we can talk about that. Maybe one approach might be we've got different ideas here, maybe work it through with staff, come back at the next meeting to talk it through, and then see. The survey we can always do, but maybe it's a bit later. That might be one way to approach it.
Well, it doesn't say how they would do it. It says staff would develop it. But you
can't just delegate stuff to staff, and much as I'd like to, but you need to have GPAC members involved with that, I think. Because in the end, it's our job to make sure this outreach to the community works. We have to take responsibility for that. So maybe think on that. Maybe if someone feels like that's really compelling and want to get in the mix on that, then that could be a good thing. Okay, anything else on these last part here? Because I think, Sarah, I probably need to open this for public comment.
So we actually already did that. So
great.
If you guys just want to, I definitely did take notes, and I can kind of tell you what I think I heard, or you can summarize what you think, and we can kind of go from there.
But why don't you go, and if I find something else, I will make a note.
Okay, so I heard that some of the groups that we may be missing are parents of young families, teens, seniors, renters, affordable housing residents, and social media users. And that we might want to consider for additional public engagement, a possible survey, reaching out to individual stakeholders to ask if they want sessions. I imagine some of that will be interviews, stakeholder interviews. Consider mailing out a postcard to just let people know about stuff, and possibly add the survey with I know Beth had previously mentioned the QR code is beneficial in those. So that might be a possibility. Increase the frequency of social media posts, a live walking tour, a youth session, the library open house, PTA newsletters, and then Chamber of Commerce events and coffee with the mayor.
Okay, here we are back. I think that was better note taking than I did. Thank you very much. Okay.
I think it is useful to kind of maybe take some of this information back, evaluate what we think it might be in terms of timeline and cost and effectiveness, and also keeping in mind that we do need to at some point sort of. There's never going to be a point where we're not going to have public comment, but where we're sort of coalescing public comment, right? So that we can actually use it and work with it. So, because certainly we can go on indefinitely and keep receiving public comment. So we'll want to keep a time frame in mind.
I think that's a good point, because it's like every enterprise, we get to diminishing returns. So it's balancing that with really trying to make sure we've done a robust effort for community input. So I think there's good stuff here. Thank you all very much. Thank you, member of the public, for sharing their thoughts. I think we'll just try to kind of crunch it on this, and it'll come back at the next session. And speaking of the next session, the next agenda topic, I think we're done with this one. Sarah, did I miss anything? Or are we shaking your head? Good. So I'd like to roll us to the next topic, which is the last one on the agenda, meeting frequency. Originally, the plan was we would meet once a month. We promptly shifted it to twice a month, given the amount of outreach. I was suggesting to staff that we make it just every week, but that got shut down. So the thought here, because I like you guys so much. But the thought here was maybe having done all these Housing 101 sessions and all the outreach, that maybe we could move this to a sort of a monthly session, which allows staff more time to prepare things in the meantime. Sarah, let me maybe pass it to you, because I think you raised it here, and then we can talk about this. So.
Sure. So we just wanted to kind of bring it back to advise that we're planning to go to once a month, and just wanted to make that clear to everyone. And we can always, test it out and see what happens. If we need to go back to multiple, twice a month, we can do that. But it was sort of intense up front to kind of get everyone up to speed and learn a lot. But now we're reverting back to the originally agreed upon once a month meeting.
And I will chime in that we're also coming into summer, which who knows where travel plans will be, but it's often a harder time for people to get together. So this might just be more realistic, just to throw that out there. But with that, I'm going to see if there's any thoughts, comments that folks in this group have. And I've got the hand raised thing, Michael, and then Carol. Mike, Kim,
yeah,
Carol.
I support the once a month for our group getting together, because I think more time, effort, energy, to the extent there are extra time, should be spent in public engagement. So I actually support the once a month idea.
Okay. Thank you. Carol?
I support the once a month idea too, but I'd like to ask about the time. We may need more time then at a meeting. In fact, I'm sure we will. So are people willing to go to 9 if we need to? But it's going to be a lot of work, 2 hours once a month. I think we need to agree we'll have more time if we go once a month.
It's a good observation. Beth, I see your hand up.
Yeah, perhaps we can go to once a month, and in between set up task force. So those of you who have contacts and are willing and able to go to schools, you go to schools. If we're going to do in-person public engagement, that's something that I can help with, or I can do outreach to Lafayette, Chateau Lafayette, and to Eden. So we can maybe either go deeper into the neighborhoods that we represent or the areas that we represent, or we can join specific task force and then use this time to come back and report. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more efficient.
That's a great idea. Thank you. Other comments or thoughts that folks have? I think we've got a budding consensus for moving this to once a month, and I think maybe just acknowledging that the meetings might run longer. So unless there's any other comments, I'd entertain a motion to that effect if someone wants to make it.
Which day once a month?
What day?
I think I would suggest we stick with the Tuesdays.
Okay.
Maybe it's we've been meeting on I believe it's the first and third Tuesday of the month.
So the third Tuesday of the month was the original plan. And then the first Tuesday of the month became a special meeting. So we would revert back to the third Tuesday of the month.
Yeah, November seems like a long time ago. Thank you, Sarah. So we'd go back to the third Tuesday, the original third Tuesday of the month.
June 15th would be the next meeting.
That's correct. And Jim, just before we do a motion, because it is on the agenda, we do need to open the public comment period, and I see one hand raised.
Thank you. I was just about to ask that question. So for members of the public who would like to make a comment with respect to us moving to once a month, I would welcome that. And staff, are there any people making comments on this point?
So Grace Dixon is now in the meeting. She'd like to unmute.
I'm sorry, I had my hand raised for engagement, and I was actually going to suggest that the Don Jenkins idea for the Taste of Lafayette, 300 tickets have already been sold, 200 are left. There'll be 500 people there. I was on a meeting with the chamber today. It is spanning the entire town from Panache down to Wine Thieves. So it's an excellent, if you could have a table at the plaza with a scan code that people could scan to sign up for a meeting or at the library or a walking tour or something that would really engage the people that are boots to the pavement in downtown Walnut Creek. That would be amazing. Also, the chamber hiring a trolley. So to take people, and it's an open air trolley with open windows. So maybe, just an idea, they could hire it for 2 days and you could get it the second day for the walking tour of these sites in Lafayette. So another idea. Also, finally, to engage the young families downtown and in the Trails neighborhood. Although my preschool is closed, I've done this for Catherine Baker when she was running. You guys can hold a meeting in my front yard and I can watch the children in the preschool and back if you like, and provide free daycare so that young families can feel informed and engaged and get out of their house. And it's all outside. So all of those ideas, there you go.
Great ideas and a very generous offer. Thank you so much. Any other public comments?
If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, or *9 if you're calling in. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to the group then to wrap up the discussion and consider a motion to move us to the once a month, third Tuesday of the month at 6, starting at 6. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Don, thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, motion has been made and seconded to switch GPAC's meetings to once a month on the third Tuesday of the month, starting at 6. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Carol Singer.
Aye.
Amrita Castellanti.
Yes.
Don Jenkins.
Aye.
Stella Weatherspoon.
Aye.
Matt Pease.
Yes.
Beth Needle.
Aye.
Jim Cervantes.
Yes.
Mike Kim.
Yes.
Susie Kelly.
Aye.
Christine Rasmussen.
Aye.
And Chair Lee is absent. Thank you.
So that concludes the agenda items. And so I'll note that for the record, it's 7:49. So we can tell Chris we got it done before 8 this time. Sure she'll appreciate that. That's it. There's a lot of work to follow up here. And I look forward to a robust session when we see you all on the 15th. And it sounds like everyone should get their tickets for the Taste of Lafayette as soon as possible before they sell out. So we'd plug that one too. And with that, I'd say the meeting is adjourned. Sarah, I don't think I need a motion for that. I could just, I'm lacking a gavel. So I wish you all a great evening and look forward to seeing you on a walking tour or the Taste of Lafayette or some other place. Take care all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.